Welcome back, sci-fi fans. As always, I'm Andrew, and I'm here with Marisha.
How's it going?
And it's just us. There's
It
nobody
is.
else. So this could be real interesting because we're going to end up doing this for
Yeah,
the whole
It's
video
going to be
instead of
adorable.
this. So now we're going to talk Moon Knight episode 3. And
It was great.
no, I loved it. I think I really like where this show's going. I really like. Did you get some like Indiana Jones vibes from like some of the like running through the city stuff? And
I mean, it was in Cairo, so I feel
but I
like
think they kind of like intentionally
leaned
went. I
into
don't
that a
think it
little
was
bit.
just because of the
Mhm.
location. I feel like they intentionally went for a little bit of that vibe.
Yeah, which is fun. I'm always down for Indiana Jones vibes.
Yep. But we're just gonna we're gonna do this. It's not gonna be real long, and we're not live. I'm sorry, I said we would be doing this live, but we ended
Alas.
up just because of it's been a crazy day. It's a crazy weekend. It's kind
And
of a
it's a
hard
holiday
weekend.
weekend,
It's
so
kind of hard to squeeze something in. So we're pre-recording this, and if you're watching with us live here tonight, I'm in the chat. But this is
which is unusual. You're not usually in the
I'm not
chat,
usually in the chat, but this is pre-recorded,
so you'll be
and
chatting.
so
about
I'll be in the chat to visit as we watch me sit here and ramble on about nonsense.
It's your go-to move, love. That's what we love about you.
So, I mean, overall, what do you think about the episode? And what do you think about the series as a whole so far? We're halfway through.
It's only six.
I think it's only 6 episodes.
Okay, I didn't realize that. I'm really enjoying it. I feel like they're doing a good job kind of exploring this character. We've got, the first episode was really Steven centric. This one was much more Mark centric. In fact, I think we pretty much just saw things from Mark's point of view in this episode, didn't we? Did we? I guess we saw Steven a couple of times.
And we get I like this thing they've got going between Mark and Steven, where now they're beginning to they're kind of opening up to each other.
Well, and they both realize that there's things the other one can do that they can't.
Right.
Like Mark, is like, well, we need Steven. She keeps telling him we need Steven. He's like, no,
he's like, he won't give the body back. Like
Right.
that's that's the concern, is that he won't give the body back. But I think they've both realized now that they need each other. And so and we kind of saw what we talked about a little bit with Steven kind of trying to be the Jiminy Cricket and be the conscience. But we've also seen more of Mark and seen that Mark is not quite as ruthless.
Yeah.
He's not out there intentionally trying to kill people. Now, people are going to wind up dead here, and we're going to get into that a little bit because we've been getting hints through the first 2 episodes that there's a third personality. And my dog is going to really make a mess of this.
He's a pest.
He is. Thor joining the conversation tonight, but
he has things to say.
We've been getting hints. There were a lot of in the first episode, the scenes in the bathroom, the scenes in the bathroom in the apartment, and the scenes in the bathroom in the museum. We really see a third reflection, or a second reflection.
Right. So we're seeing 3 different
images, and so it was always, does the third represent Khonshu? Or does or is there a third personality? And we've already talked. They told us in episode 2 that there have been other personalities, and it seems that Mark creates these personalities to sort of cover, but they wind up taking on a life of their own.
Right.
So it's real interesting the way they're setting this up. What do you think? Let's just jump right onto that. We've seen the third personality has come out. We haven't seen him yet.
Right. And they both think that it's the other one.
Right. They're both accusing each other. Like, these guys are dead. And Mark says, Steven, what are you doing? He thinks Steven has lost it.
Right.
And he's freaked out by it.
Right.
Because Steven is supposed to be the calm side of the personality.
Right.
And Steven's saying, it's not me, like, what is happening? And so it's the third personality, and it's a more brutal, ruthless personality.
Right.
It is likely going to either be Jake Lockley, this third personality from the comics that everybody wanted to see, which is a more ruthless, brutal personality. And it makes you start to wonder, like, what other roles has he played in here? I mean, was this third character the one that asked the girl out on the date at the museum?
Right.
Like, we don't know yet what other role the third personality has played. So I guess the real question is, do you think it's a third personality, or is this Khonshu fully possessing the body?
Yeah, I think that's anybody's guess at this point.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I think that's kind of hard to guess. I think it's going to be a third personality. I think they're setting Khonshu up to be a very complex entity, but not necessarily evil. Like,
Yeah, but not necessarily good either.
but he's a little darker, but like, we haven't seen for him to call on Mark to actually kill people. Now we see the scene where the kid falls off the cliff because Khonshu says he'll talk.
Right. Oh, I really thought he'd talk.
And there's not any remorse there.
No. It's just like, oh, that's not how I thought that was going to go.
Right.
Yeah, we move on.
Now, what did you like about this episode?
I think we got to see a little more of Layla, because I mean, obviously, like we were introduced to her in the very first episode.
Yeah.
As just as a voice and a number. But and I think she's going to prove to be a really interesting part of the story. She's obviously, I mean, she's Mark's wife.
Yeah.
But I think that Steven being involved is going to make things a lot more complicated, because I think she really likes Steven. Right. I think she trusts him, I think. And I think she's a really interesting character in her own right. She's obviously Egyptian, right? Daughter of an archaeologist. So
I'll be right back. Okay, sorry about that. The dog is insane, but
yes, he's a bit much.
I don't even know what he was barking at, but
he doesn't know.
He really wanted to talk about Moon Knight.
Yeah, obviously. I mean, who wouldn't?
Now, what do you think about Layla? I mean, I'm okay with Layla as a character. I'm actually like Layla more as a character now. And, one of the things we've done in Marvel, and there's been a lot of accusations of these MCU shows being bait and switch.
Okay.
That, oh, well, we were pitched a Hawkeye show, but it ends up being, not Hawkeye. But Hawkeye remains the main character of that show.
Yeah.
All the way through. It's about his arc.
Mm-hmm.
It's about introducing her, and I think it was a great way to introduce her, and she's a fantastic character. But the show never became Kate Bishop's show, right? Even though that was sort of the accusation. There's been some accusations, or at least concerned, that this was going to be a bait and switch to somehow introduce Layla and make her the main character, or somehow even make her the Moon Knight. And
who cares? I mean,
well, I don't see it happening though.
I mean, I think that the dynamic they have going on right now is interesting. And I mean, I think that maybe possibly eventually, because clearly Khonshu has an interest in her.
Yeah, Khonshu has an interest in her, but maybe not beyond using her to manipulate Mark.
Well, but Mark believes that Khonshu wants her for his avatar. But I mean, ultimately, it'll still be a Moon Knight show if that's what they decide to do. But I don't see them deciding to do that. I mean,
no.
Oscar Isaac is Oscar Isaac.
Oscar Isaac is great. I'm
enjoying
her for a while.
I'm enjoying her, but I don't see them being like, "Ooh, let's replace one of the biggest names in the world with."
They're only doing that if Oscar Isaac decides that he's done,
and which is fine. They'll give themselves an option.
Yeah,
they've made the mistake of not giving themselves an option before and having to recast Bruce Banner.
Right. No, they're not just going to kick one of the biggest names on the planet right now to the curb to replace with a relative unknown.
Right. And like I said, I'm enjoying her character, but I don't see them.
No, they're setting this character up to do. They're going to do Midnight Suns. And they want Oscar Isaac to be part of that. Mm-hmm. Now they may, she might end up being someone, an important character beyond, what we think of her right now.
Honestly
we did this thing. We didn't overpower when she gets in a fight. One, he's fighting a whole bunch of people. She fights one, and she kind of has to fight a little dirty to win it, which is, fairly accurate, but.
Well, and I also kind of wonder if eventually they won't go the direction of her having her as an avatar for one of the other gods.
Yeah.
Have her as maybe even Hathor seems like the most likely contender, because it seems like just from the little bit of interaction
Hathor, I think, is not done in this show.
I think Hathor and Khonshu have a thing going on,
or at least had,
but the dynamic of Khonshu and Hathor had a thing going on, and Mark and Layla had a thing going on, could definitely make it for an interesting dynamic. If she, I think that's probably a more likely scenario for where they're going to go with her long term than to make her the new Moon Knight avatar, don't you think?
Oh, I think so. I mean, it's not that someone else couldn't be the Moon Knight avatar, but there's all these accusations of a bait and switch, but there hasn't been that would be a bait and switch on a massive scale to do that. And it might happen. It might happen after this series. It ain't happening in this series. He's Moon Knight right now.
Yeah. And they've spent a lot of money to make him Moon Knight, I'm confident. And as long as they keep, as long as that keeps happening.
Oh, I think he's Moon Knight. I think he's Moon Knight for the next 10 years if that's what he wants.
Yeah, I think so. Sometimes actors decide they want to move on.
Yeah. But now, there are some other, what'd you think about the other characters? The guy, the collector, the guy that has all the Egyptian artifacts.
Yeah, I mean, I think he was an interesting character. Unfortunately, the actor,
that
was in a tragic skiing accident. So
yeah,
whatever.
He was probably set up to be a long-term character in this.
I think so. Yeah.
But as he is in the comics, but I think that I don't know that they recast. I'm not sure where they go, or if they just move on beyond,
or even just have somebody else, have him have some kind of tragic accident and someone else inherits his empire.
Well, he already is dead in the show, as far as we know.
Okay.
I mean, he catches one of the moon-shaped blades to the back, and he disappears into the darkness.
Okay, yeah.
So I mean, it's easy enough to have him. I mean, he died on screen. We didn't see a body, but
we just don't bring him back.
You just don't bring him back. So that's not a huge deal. I do like that that's a continuation of what we learned in
Falcon and the Winter Soldier.
And Falcon and the Winter Soldier
about Madripoor.
Well, we name dropped Madripoor, which was big, but we also learned from Sharon Carter that all of the most important works of art and artifacts in the world are not in museums. Those are fakes, and that all those things are actually in the hands of the wealthy. Well, here we go. We have really important artifacts in a private collection.
Right.
While all those things are probably fakes in museums around the world. So,
and I'm not going to lie. That's very possible.
No,
as an actual real life scenario. I buy that. Who cares though? If it's a convincing enough fake to convince all the most important critics in the world.
Yeah. But I like that little tie-in to Madripoor and that little name drop.
Yeah.
It was just a really cool. That fight scene is really good once he finally puts the suit back on.
Yeah.
I think
and so the switch in the middle too was great.
So right, and that's part
of Mr. Moon or Mr.
It's Mr. Knight.
Mr. Knight. Okay.
And that's part of Stevens recognizing that he needs Mark. If they're going to do this, that he needs Mark.
You still told me to put on a suit. That's my favorite line so far.
Right. And I know some people pure, and in fairness, I'm going to say, I've never read a Moon Knight comic book. I know almost nothing about the character other than the basics and what I've read to kind of catch myself up. And honestly, a lot of times when a show comes out like this, I dig real deep. I want to learn as much about the lore as I can before I go in. And on this one, because I knew nothing, I chose to remain that way. And at some point when this series is over, I will go on a Moon Knight deep dive.
Right.
But I kind of like, for a change, not knowing what's going on. And
then you can actually be surprised whenever 3 Peter Parkers show up.
And I know some people aren't real happy with that use of Mr. Knight.
Right.
I think that that Steven's idea of putting on a suit it's a suit.
I thought it was really clever.
And I think that's a really, really clever, funny
Mm-hmm.
use of the whole Mr. Knight thing from the comics. And
Mm-hmm.
um, because it doesn't necessarily serve a purpose.
Right. For there to be two
Well,
costumes for
right.
for the Avatar.
There are things in comic books that just frankly don't have a place in shows that we're trying to make feel more realistic.
Right.
Now, what I like about this show is we went way more into the magic side, which I think was really good. We needed to do that. We haven't done that much in the first two. We've spent most of the first two episodes dealing with the dissociative identity disorder and the switching back and forth between the two characters, but we didn't really get into the magic side of it, other than the fact that Khonshu's around.
Right.
Khonshu moving the moon, affecting the night sky to get the attention of the other gods.
Well, at first there was an eclipse to get the attention of the gods. He moved the night.
Well, that's what I'm talking about. Moving the moon, causing the eclipse. And then, just to get the attention of the gods. What do you think about the scene in the chamber with the other gods?
I thought that was fun. It was interesting to get to see the different avatars for the deity, all over the world. You've got lots of different people, lots of different accents, lots of different it was a really kind of eclectic, interesting group, I think, just in their own right.
Yeah.
And you also get a little more of an idea of how these entities are functioning.
Right.
And it also
we also confirmed some things about where they come from.
Yeah.
They name dropped the Overvoid, which is the same thing as the celestial Heliopolis.
Okay.
So it's a in the comics, it's an adjacent dimension, sort of a pocket dimension kind of thing. It's the same, almost the exact same thing they do with the Greek gods. Okay. They're kind of in this adjacent dimension, and at some point they, in the comics they do meddle, but they also at times in the comics chose the Eternals to kind of be their, to represent them basically on Earth.
Right.
And
I think also because at this point, anytime you bring in really powerful entities, you have to answer the question,
where have they been?
Where have they been?
Yeah.
Where have they been, and why haven't they done jack about any of these things? Right. And it's because they don't care. They don't do people anymore. The only reason that they're even showing up now is because one of their own is involved. They don't do humans anymore. The only humans that they have any involvement with is their avatars.
Right.
So I think that sort of gives a really necessary explanation. Like I said, anytime you bring in any new powerful entities, you have to give a really good reason for why we haven't seen them yet. Like whenever a character comes in and snaps away half of sentient life in the universe, and we didn't see you lift a finger, then all of a sudden we have to have a really good explanation for why.
Right. Yeah. So I think that's an interesting drop. We also know we're fixing to start getting some of the Greek gods as well, like the actual Greek gods, not just their the Eternals kind of playing the role. So I do, and at some point I kind of hope they will, by using the term Overvoid, I think they're kind of confirming this, whether we want to call it a pocket dimension or an adjacent dimension or whatever we want to call it there, that's this place that's not exactly on Earth, but they can access Earth from there. And in the comics, I did read enough to know about the celestial Heliopolis that it's kind of like Asgard. Asgard exists in the same dimension, but basically in actual mythology, it accesses Earth, accesses Midgard via the Rainbow Bridge.
Right.
And the celestial Heliopolis, there's this golden bridge to access Earth. So there's a lot of parallels, and it makes sense. They're all written by the same people. So of course they use similar tropes to explain how these people come and go. and interact with Earth, and why they're not always here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I did find it interesting. I mean, we know now that several big members of the Ennead still have avatars on Earth, just to kind of keep an eye on things.
Right.
Um,
or just so that they still have some kind of physical, so just to maybe even exist, we don't know how, on what level they exist in the overvoid. So, the avatars may just be their way of having some sort of corporeal form.
Yeah, maybe. I'm not sure. Well, I guess I kind of hope we see more of that. I'm kind of doubting we will, but um, I'm kind of hoping that as we introduce more groups of gods into the mix, that we'll get kind of further explanation about how all that works. At least in this, outside of the comics, because they're clearly, they do a good job generally of taking things from the comics and deciding how does this work, because this is a different Earth,
right,
than the one in the comics. Yes,
right.
You got Earth, our main Earth over there. We've got Earth 616, but this is Earth 999,999, and so we write the story to fit this version.
Right.
And I think they do a good job with that. My only complaint, it's actually my only complaint, I think, with this episode is, and it's fine, it just didn't work for me. It doesn't bother me, it doesn't ruin the episode, was in the when they're in the chamber in the pyramid, in this meeting, kind of when Khonshu takes over, and Hathor tells him, it's kind of weird, just accept it, embrace it. But kind of the over exaggerated thing he does every time Khonshu speaks through his body. Like, if he had done that like the first time that Khonshu speaks, and then it had slowly subsided, but it got a little obnoxious by the end of it. It's like, just let Khonshu speak. Like, we don't have to do this weird overacting thing. Like, let's just have Khonshu speak.
Yeah.
That's really the only thing I can think of that I didn't like about this episode. I thought the effects were great.
The fight scene was great.
The fight scenes were great. I like that we learned a little more about Layla.
Yeah, I think we got to see some I don't know if character development is the right word, but we definitely got to see more about what's going on with Mark and Layla, who they are as people.
Right. I would say that so far we haven't seen a lot of character development, because we're not doing an origin story here. We're joining midstream.
Right, yeah.
So, but we are getting backstory. We're getting filled in on who these people are. So there's really a couple of other things here. Do we think that Mark killed Layla's father?
I think so. I 100%. I think that's not even subtle.
I don't think it's subtle, but I wonder if it was the possibility that it was one of the other personalities, but Mark still feels responsible.
Yeah.
Or that even Khonshu could have been involved with it, with the death.
Yeah.
And then Mark feels responsible.
Right.
But I tend to think that Mark did something and killed her father.
I mean, he may not have done it on purpose. It may have been some sort of accident, but I think that the upshot of it was maybe even whenever at the point where he became possessed or whatever of Khonshu's, when he became the Avatar, I think that is tied up with her father's death. I don't know exactly how, but I think it's all tied up there together.
Yeah. Do you think we'll get a flashback to see the moment of how Mark became the Avatar for Khonshu?
Oh, definitely. I think before the season's out, we see that in a flashback.
I hope we do. Like, I want to see it. I think it's actually important to.
I predict that we leave with some kind of cliffhanger, and the opening for one episode or the other is a flashback of that, 10 years ago. And we've already done a little bit of that in this show, haven't we? Or did I dream that?
I don't think we've had anything really from the past come up yet, have we?
Maybe not. Maybe I'm thinking about something else. But I think that if I just had to guess, based on how things like this tend to go, that's how it falls out. We leave on some kind of cliffhanger, like, oh no, what, like, oh, you killed my father, and then, cut to black, and then we get the beginning of the next episode and we find out the rest of the story.
Yeah. So, the last thing we see, I mean, okay, so we're talking about, who Khonshu is, and like, is he good? Is he bad? Is he kind of just a little bit of both? Does he just serve his own purposes? And I think that the meeting with the other gods calls some of that, because we've kind of been like, well, he's not really good. Like, and I think they're intentionally being vague about what his role is, but his accusations against the other gods, of leaving for the opulence of the overvoid and abandoning humanity,
right,
kind of calls into question like what Khonshu is really all about.
Right.
I mean, let's not forget, like, I mean, of course the comics are different, and again, I've never read them, so I don't know. Most of the Egyptian gods are benevolent.
Yeah.
We don't get a lot of evil among we
didn't see Set at all.
Right.
Set's kind of the exception.
But we don't, I mean, our Egyptian gods are not typically seen as,
they're not quite
evil,
as asinine
wicked
as,
gods.
say, Greek gods.
Yeah, the Greek gods were greedy and jealous, and
Greek gods are just, they're total jackasses all the time.
Yeah. And so we might see some of that, and you can say that about some of the Egyptian gods, but when we talk about Osiris was always seen as benevolent. Thoth, same thing, always benevolent.
Hathor,
benevolent.
Not in Stargate.
No. No, definitely not in Stargate.
No benevolent Egyptian gods here.
Right. So it'll be interesting to see how they play that out. But I think for me, that calls into question, I had said that I thought Khonshu was at the, that Khonshu might actually be the villain.
Right.
In some sense. I mean, I don't see any way you can make Amit the hero or anything like that. I think she has to be a villain. But could Khonshu also be? I mean, is it essentially two bad guys that are kind of at each other's throats here? And why is he the sole god that's set on making sure that Amit remains in prison?
Well, it sounds like nobody else believes that they're really trying to let Amit out.
Right.
Because, I mean, it seems like they imprisoned her collectively, but nobody else buys his story that this guy's trying to let Amit out.
Because they just don't trust Khonshu. Because we also haven't seen what made him an outcast. Why the other gods cast Khonshu out, which is another thing that would, I think that's the linchpin that tells us who Khonshu really is.
Yeah, I think so.
Is what did he do that caused the other gods to cast him out?
Okay, so if we're going to talk about things that kind of took you out of it for a minute, you know that there's an app you can put in a date for any day in the history of ever, and it will show you the night sky.
It's true. Now, I've never used those. Will they go back thousands of years?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, it's predictable. It's 100%. You know exactly what the night sky has done forever. As long as you do the math, you can do it indefinitely.
Not 100%. Because we can't account for comets and meteors and things that potentially pass by thousands.
No, but we don't have comets and meteors. Those aren't the entities that
it's the stars.
It's the stars. So the stars, their drift is very predictable. True. Literally, I've used that app.
Okay, and I'm aware the app exists. I wasn't aware of how far back those apps were actually in a handheld version. On an app, how far back you could actually go.
I mean, like, I think because I thought they were going to pull out the date and she's going to go beep beep beep.
Right.
And there it was going to be, but no.
But they Khonshu had to do something for them to imprison him in stone.
Right.
So that was our answer to that. Was Khonshu again manipulates the night sky, sets it back thousands of years.
They just didn't know about that app.
The effects were pretty
If
amazing.
only they had known about that app, that whole debacle could have been avoided.
True. So that's kind of where we leave off, though, is we've got Khonshu imprisoned in the stone
Mhm.
for affecting the night sky again, and directly in opposition to what they had just told him.
And clearly he believes that he either trusts Mark enough or thinks that Mark is going to be desperate enough to come get him out.
But that's the other side of this, is like, thinking of Khonshu as a bad guy, but he made a sacrifice play here.
Mhm.
He's going to rely on a human
Mhm.
to come free him
Mhm.
from an imprisonment by the gods.
Mhm.
So, um, there's something to be said for the character that will make the sacrifice play. I mean, that's the
Mhm.
theme of Tony Stark's entire arc, right?
Mhm.
That's what Cap tells him in the first Avengers. You're not the guy to make the sacrifice play. And he
Mhm.
literally spends the entire rest of the Avengers run, of the first 3 phase run,
Mhm.
being the guy that will always
Mhm.
make the sacrifice play.
Yeah.
It's not that the others won't, but he's the one that makes the big one in the end.
Right.
So I don't know, but what do you think? I mean, no powers anymore.
I
It's not
don't
that
think
we
that
don't
lasts.
think that.
I think that lasts one episode max.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think this is a
How
lot of
interesting is a
fun.
Moon Knight show with no Moon Knight?
It depends. I mean, we've shown that Mark's a pretty capable on his own. As a fighter, I still think if you're going to do a Moon Knight show, that it should have some Moon Knight in it.
Yeah.
Um,
Like I said, these are the sorts of things that, the big catastrophes that last like 1 or 2 episodes, and then
I
we
think it's one
managed
whole
to.
episode without the powers,
Mhm.
and then middle of the 5th episode we get them back
Yep.
in time for setting up the final arc.
In time for the big fight with Amit at the last episode.
Right. Um, yeah, the throwdown with Amit at the end is gonna be interesting. Um, I am curious. Like, the only thing I would say about the writing that doesn't necessarily make sense to me
Mhm.
is how Amit has an avatar.
She doesn't have an avatar. I mean, she's imprisoned. Like, he's clearly got
How is he wielding Amit's powers if
he's
he's
got
not an
some
avatar?
way. He's got some. It's that little doohickey. I think he's got his cane. I think
So it's an artifact,
it's an
but
artifact, but he's not got a suit. He hasn't. His eyes aren't glowy. I don't think he's actually an avatar. I think he's just an acolyte.
okay. But why would they summon Harrow like they summoned the other avatars?
He's been an avatar. He knows how it works.
Okay. I guess we'll see. That's the only thing that I see as
I mean, the
sort
thing
of
is, if she's imprisoned, then I don't think she can interact with the physical world at all as herself. Only I think this artifact is the only connection she has right now.
okay. I mean, it makes sense.
Because otherwise, what is imprisoning her do?
Our children are very
They
loud.
noisy, very noisy.
If it's not a dog, it's apparently kids.
Why not? Because life's got to be interesting.
All right. But yeah, I mean, so yeah, I agree. I think they've got to get Khonshu's got to be gotten out of prison there pretty
Mm-hmm.
quickly for this to move forward in an interesting way.
Mm-hmm.
I'm liking the show. I would say that right now it's not going anywhere like big enough to be my favorite MCU series.
Yeah.
Um, but it's mostly because we have no answers to anything yet.
Right.
And so we'll still have to see how the last 3 episodes play out to see where I would
Mm-hmm.
put this kind of in the pantheon of MCU shows. But uh, right now, I'm really liking it,
Yeah.
but I have no idea where to rank it.
Yeah, we'll see. I don't think you can tell that till the end. But I'll be eager to tune in next Wednesday and see what happens next.
Yeah.
So,
All right. Well, anything else before we wrap up?
I don't think so. I think I'm all talked out on the subject.
Okay. No predictions. No.
I already made my predictions.
You already made your predictions.
Already made them.
No more thoughts about anything.
All the thoughts are thought out.
All right, guys. Well, thank you for joining us to listen to us ramble about Moon Knight episode 3. Let us know in the comments. We want to know what you're thinking about the show, what you're liking, what you're not. If you know kind of where at this point, where would you rank it among the other MCU series? Some shows coming up. We've got a couple of Coruscant Radio Underground episodes that should be going up over the next 2 weeks, as well as a couple of science fictionary episodes, including 2 weeks from Thursday, this past Thursday. So just under 2 weeks, we will be dropping our 100th episode of the podcast.
It's pretty crazy.
I can't believe we got to 100. Not that fast,
right?
But we did.
We've rocked 2 episodes a week for a long time. Like we haven't done 2 episodes a week like just right now, but we have spent a lot of time talking about nerd stuff.
We have. All right. Well, that's going to do it for tonight. And so I hope you guys have a very happy Easter. And until next time, may the force be with you.
This podcast is part of the Red 5 Network. For more Red 5 Network podcasts, visit red5network.com.